The Medecine Formation is a rich geological and paleontological site located in northwestern Montana, near the eastern flank of the Rocky Mountains. Dating back to the late Cretaceous period, this formation represents a dynamic and diverse ancient ecosystem. During this time, the region experienced a warm temperate to subtropical climate with pronounced wet and dry seasons, influenced by the nearby western interior seaway and active volcanic activity. The landscape featured expansive semi-arid floodplains, braided river systems and scattered wetlands. Vegetation included a mix of coniferous trees, along with ferns, cycads, and early flowering plants. These environments supported a wide range of life, although this particular depiction focuses solely on the natural landscape without any animals. The Medecine Formation provides valuable insights into North America's prehistoric environments and how ecosystems evolved in response to shifting climates and geologic forces. Oohkotokia was a medium ankylosaurid dinosaur that is so far only known from a single individual, though other fossils gathered in the past may actually represent specimens of this genus. It seems to have been similar to Euoplocephalus, though is considered distinct because the skull texture of Oohkotokia is quite smooth in comparison to other ankylosaurid genera. Like with its ankylosaurid brethren, it would have been protected by a covering of heavy bony armor all across its back and sides, with a heavy bony club on the end of its tail. Scolosaurus was once one of the most well-known ankylosaurs of the mid-20th century, thanks to the exceptional completeness of its holotype specimen. In 1971, it was lumped together with several other ankylosaurs under the genus Euoplocephalus, a classification later challenged due to lack of definitive evidence. By the early 21st century, further studies revalidated Scolosaurus as a distinct genus, separate from Euoplocephalus and others. Euoplocephalus reached 5.3 meters in length and 2 tons in body mass. Its body was low-slung and very flat and wide, standing on 4 sturdy legs. Its head had a short drooping snout with a horny beak to bite off plants that were digested in the large gut. Like other ankylosaurids, Euoplocephalus was largely covered by bony armor plates, among them rows of large high-ridged oval scuts. The neck was protected by 2 bone rings. A nearly complete dinosaur skeleton discovered in 1983 near Choteau, Montana, was finally identified 24 years later as a new species named Cerasinops. This small, primitive ceratopsian weighed about 10 kilograms, stood 3 feet tall, and dates back roughly 80 million years to the early late Cretaceous. It is significant for linking North American and Asian Neoceratopsian dinosaurs, although it lacked the horns typical of later ceratopsians. Leptoceratopsids were small, stocky ceratopsian dinosaurs that, while less famous than their horned relatives, were widespread and successful. Adapted to an herbivorous lifestyle, they had powerful beaks and a unique chewing method similar to that of mammals, allowing them to process tough plants like ferns and cycads. Prenoceratops was about 1.5 to 2 meters long and closely related to Leptoceratops, though it had a lower, more sloped skull. Among the 5 original specimens, parts of 3 skulls were discovered, detached from their owner's body and fragmented. Despite this, the skull showed that Brachyceratops had only small bumps over the eyes rather than full-grown horns like in the more famous ceratopsians. The nasal horn was thick and low, while its neck frill was moderately large. Unfortunately, the specimens were incomplete, so it cannot be determined if there were parietal openings in the frill like some other ceratopsians possessed. With holotype fossils initially described as specimens of Rubeosaurus, Stellasaurus is a genus of centrosaurine ceratopsian dinosaur. Although little fossil material exists, it has been reconstructing as having 2 large upwards pointing spikes rising from the back of the neck frill. Two smaller spikes rose up at slight angles outwards either side of the two central spikes. These created a star shape which was the inspiration of the name Stellasaurus. Styracosaurus was a ceratopsid dinosaur living during the late Cretaceous, in what is now Alberta and Montana, in North America. Around 5 meters long, it was one of the most elaborately ornamented horned dinosaurs, with a long nose horn and multiple elongated spikes on its frill. There was actually quite a lot of variation in the frills of Styracosaurus, with varying numbers of long spikes and extra hook-like projections present on some individuals. But one recently discovered specimen nicknamed Hannah is especially surprising. It had a noticeable amount of asymmetry in its skull. The left and right sides show different numbers and arrangements of spikes, so much so that if the two halves had been discovered separately, they might have been identified as belonging to two completely different species. Frill arrangements are often used to define different ceratopsids, so if this level of individual variation and asymmetry existed in other species, too, then we may need to re-evaluate some of them. Achelousaurus was a ceratopsian dinosaur growing up to 6 meters long. It represents a transitional form within the Pachyrhinosaurini, positioned between horned species like Eniosaurus and the bossed Pachyrhinosaurus. Instead of horns, it had rough bony bosses over its snout and eyes, likely covered in keratin and possibly used for headbutting or ramming. Juveniles initially had small brow horns, which gradually developed into the characteristic bosses as they matured. Eniosaurus was another ceratopsid dinosaur belonged to the Pachyrhinosaurini group known for distinctive nasal ornamentation. It had minimal brow horns, 2 long spikes on its frill, and a unique forward curving, hook-shaped nose horn unlike any other ceratopsid. Fossils from over 15 individuals of various ages reveal rapid juvenile growth, slowing around age 3 to 5, likely marking the onset of reproductive maturity. The largest known individuals reached about 4.5 meters in length, though they were still subadults. It has been claimed that ceratopsian dinosaurs were herding animals, due to the large number of known bone beds containing multiple members of the same ceratopsian species. In 2010, Hunt and Fark pointed out that this was mainly true for Centrosaurian ceratopsians. Horner assumed that the horned dinosaurs at Landslide Butte lived in herds which had been killed by drought or disease.
Power trip or what? Huge adults fleeing.
Because of the advanced development of the bones and teeth of the embryos, Horner concluded that the young of Orodromeus were precocial. It has been speculated that this animal may have burrowed much like its relative Orictodromeus, based upon the packing of their bones in situations where they typically would have been scattered. Some examined herbivore coexistence on the island continent of Laramidia, during the late Cretaceous. It was concluded that small ornithischians like Orodromeus were generally restricted to feeding on vegetation at, or below the height of 1 meter. Acristavus was an hadrosaurid notable for its complete lack of cranial ornamentation, unlike more famous crested relatives. Its plain skull suggests it may have belonged to a different lineage or represented a more basal form within the hadrosaurid family. Some paleontologists believe it lost ornamentation through evolutionary pressures, while others suggest it predates the development of such traits. Maiasaura was a social, herd-living hadrosaurid that raised its young in large nesting colonies, with nests spaced closely together, about 7 meters apart, less than the length of an adult. Each nest contained 30 to 40 oval eggs, likely incubated using rotting vegetation rather than body heat. Hatchlings had underdeveloped legs and worn teeth, indicating they were immobile and fed by adults. They grew rapidly, reaching up to 150 centimeters in their first year, and possibly left the nest shortly after, this rapid growth supports the idea of warm-bloodedness. Life history studies reveal high mortality in the first year, but if individuals survived beyond that, their chances of survival significantly improved until old age. Juveniles were mostly bipedal, shifting to a quadrupedal gait as they matured, and their diet included fibrous plants, bark, and even rotting wood. There is evidence of sexual dimorphism, with one sex being around 45% larger, though which was male or female remains uncertain. As a hadrosaurid, Gryposaurus would have been a bipedal and quadrupedal herbivore, eating a variety of plants. Its skull had special joints that permitted a grinding motion analogous to chewing, and its teeth were continually replacing and packed into dental batteries that contained hundreds of teeth, only a relative handful of which were in use at any time. Plant material would have been cropped by its broad beak, and held in the jaws by a cheek-like organ. Its feeding range would have extended from the ground to about 4 meters above. Prosaurolophus lived in coastal floodplains fed on the conifer trees and the tree bark in the area, implying that it was more likely a browser rather than a grazer. There is bone-bed evidence that this genus lived in groups during at least part of the year. Additionally, it had several potential methods for display in a social setting. The bony facial crest is an obvious candidate, and nasal diverticula may also have been present. The hollow crest of Hypacrosaurus most likely had social functions, such as a visual signal allowing individuals to identify sex or species, and providing a resonating chamber for making noises. The crest and its associated nasal passages have also figured in the debate about dinosaur endothermy, specifically in discussions about nasal turbinates. Examining the oxygen isotope ratio from the bones from different parts of an extinct animal's body should indicate which thermoregulation mode an animal used during its lifetime. Gorgosaurus was a large tyrannosaurid that reached 9 meters in length and weighed up to 3 tons, with a proportionally large skull and long hind limbs adapted for fast running. Its skull had distinct features like a circular eye socket, crests in front of the eyes and numerous robust teeth suited for strong biting, with estimated bite forces ranging from 12 to 22,000 newtons. Skin impressions show mostly small, sparse scales, suggesting a texture finer than that of many other dinosaurs. Growth studies revealed that Gorgosaurus had a prolonged juvenile phase, followed by a rapid growth spurt and sexual maturity at around 5 to 7 years, indicating an ontogenetic shift in size and skull shape. A 2023 find of a juvenile specimen with stomach contents showed direct evidence of smaller prey consumption, reinforcing theories about dietary shifts as they matured. The species is considered ecologically important for filling multiple predatory niches at different life stages, much like modern Komodo dragons. Daspletosaurus horneri is a newly discovered species of tyrannosaur named in honor of paleontologist Jack Horner. This predator was the youngest and last member of its lineage, closely related to Daspletosaurus torosus from Alberta, suggesting a direct evolutionary transition between the two. Measuring about 9 meters long and 2.2 meters tall, it had a broad snout, small orbital horns, and unique cranial features that suggest it had a keratin-covered horn above its eye. It preyed on a variety of dinosaurs, including ceratopsians, hadrosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, and smaller theropods. Fossils studied include both juvenile and adult specimens, offering insight into its development and evolutionary biology. Researchers found that this tyrannosaur likely evolved through a rare, non-branching process, where one species gradually transformed into another. Evidence from bone texture indicates it had a lipless, scaly face with regions of thick, armor-like skin for protection during feeding. Like modern crocodilians, its skull had hundreds of nerve openings, making its snout highly sensitive, comparable to human fingertips. This sensitivity, controlled by the trigeminal nerve, may have given it a tactile sense used in hunting or interacting with its environment. The study also links this feature to a broader evolutionary pattern across vertebrates, where the trigeminal nerve plays a central role in specialized sensory adaptations. At least a few studies have speculated a piscivorous lifestyle for Richardoestesia, due to its vast distribution as well as predominance in marine sites. Because of the disparity in location and time of the many referred teeth, researchers have cast doubt on the idea that they all belong to the same genus or species, and the genus is best considered a form taxon. Saurornitholestes was a small, lightly built dromaeosaurid dinosaur, standing roughly 60 centimeters tall at the hip. It had a long, curved claw on its second toe and large, fang-like front teeth similar to those of Velociraptor, with an unusually large olfactory bulb suggesting a keen sense of smell. Its feeding habits involved a puncture and pull method, preferring larger prey and including bone in its diet, which allowed it to coexist with related species by occupying a different ecological niche. The exact relationships of Dromaeosaurus are somewhat unclear. Although its rugged build gives it a primitive appearance, it was actually a very specialized animal. The teeth tend to be more heavily worn than those of its relative Saurornitholestes, suggesting that its jaws were used for crushing and tearing rather than simply slicing through flesh. Bambiraptor is known primarily from a juvenile specimen about 90 centimeters long, estimated to grow up to 3 meters in adulthood, with long hind limbs suggesting it was a fast runner and highly agile. Research indicates it had opposable fingers and forelimb flexibility that likely allowed it to grasp and manipulate food, similar to some modern small mammals. Its relatively large brain, especially the enlarged cerebellum, implies higher intelligence and agility, possibly linked to an arboreal lifestyle or hunting fast-moving prey. The remains of this specimen are controversial, typically assigned to Troodon, but later studies suggested that the genus may be dubious. However, it has been proposed that these remains do indeed belong to Troodon formosus, and that one specimen should probably serve as the neotype. A 2023 study using presumed Troodon eggshells from the Oldman Formation used clumped isotope thermometry to determine their formation and development. The study found that in contrast to the accelerated mineralization of eggs in modern birds, Troodon and likely other non-avian maniraptorans had slowed egg calcification akin to other reptiles. Chirostenotes was likely an omnivore or herbivore, as suggested by comparisons with related species like Anzu and C. nagnathus. Its elongated second finger with a straight claw may have been adapted for probing crevices to catch soft-bodied prey such as grubs or small animals. However, if it had large primary feathers on that finger like other oviraptorosaurs, this feeding behavior might have been unlikely. A study on stress fractures showed that Chirostenotes experienced very few injuries in its foot bones, indicating a relatively low level of physical stress. Comparing the fossil size to the wing bones of other ground birds, Piksi would have been relatively small, with a wingspan reaching 1 meter. The original description of the fossils found its affinities unresolvable except that it was probably an ornithothoracine bird. Paleontologists reinterpreted Piksi as a pterosaur rather than a bird. It has since been noted that the humerus of Piksi possesses features which found in some theropods but not in any pterodactyloid pterosaurs. Montanazhdarcho was a relatively small pterosaur, reaching 2.5 meters in wingspan. The fossil is largely uncompressed and that of an adult exemplar, as established by a study of the bone by de Rickels. It consists of a partial left wing, lacking the outer 3 wing finger phalanges, a complete shoulder girdle, a crushed cervical vertebra and 2 fragments of the symphysis of the mandible. The jaws were edentulous, they lacked teeth.